early morning in the Bavarian Alps. These women have come up from Mittenwald, a village in the valley. They say that when they go rock climbing, they put their trust in God.
I do believe that God is someone who lovingly watches over us. And you can talk to him as you would to a friend. He knows exactly what situation I'm in and how I feel, even when I don't put it into words.
In a few weeks, Regina Grefrath will be making a commitment for life. This excursion into the mountains is giving her time to think about it.
We're taking the Via Ferrata Mittenwald. We came up this morning on the gondola. This is where it starts. Let's see what awaits us back there.
How long will it take?
That depends on our speed. Some do it in 7 hours. We'll probably take longer. Let's see.
By the end of the day, Regina is tired but relaxed. The climb was tough going. She goes off to get changed. Wearing casual clothing is an exception. She's usually dressed in what might be considered much more traditional garb. Regina Grefrath is, in fact, Sister Maria Regina. Not a fully professed sister yet, but still a novice. In a few weeks, she'll be taking her final vows, committing herself to spend the rest of her life in this Augustinian congregation. We want to document the weeks leading up to that big day. Now 31, there was a time Regina wanted a very different kind of life.
I wanted to get married, have children, and live in a little house somewhere in the countryside, and have a dog perhaps. But then I realized I couldn't shake the idea.
What idea?
That I should enter a convent. I felt that God had a plan for me and was perhaps waiting for me to put that plan into action. And then I thought, no way am I going to enter a convent. I want something totally different in life. But God didn't let up. I would almost say it was a bit of a struggle. I certainly took a long time to reach a decision.
Sister Regina joined the Augustinian Congregation of the Blessed Virgin Mary in 2009. Since then, she's been testing whether she's suited to this consecrated life. The young woman has been asking herself what exactly she's looking for in the combination of prayer, silence, and social responsibility, and whether she's happy living according to the Augustinian rule. She discusses those issues with Sister Beate. Sister Beate isn't just Regina's rock climbing companion. She's also her Mother Superior.
Wer man abschalten kann?
Vom Alltag.
Vom Alltag? Den Blick wieder auf das Wesentliche lenken.
Ja, genau. Schwester Regina hat ja Theologie studiert.
Sister Regina has a degree in theology, so she came with a lot of background knowledge. But you don't study the specifics of religious life at university. She had to be introduced to the Augustinian way of life and to what consecrated life means in practice.
The sisters take a vow of chastity. That's incomprehensible to most people in the modern world, the voluntary renunciation of sex. Yet it's part of the reason why the sisters wear a voluminous habit, to hide their femininity.
Considering that the love between a man and a woman is something beautiful and fulfilling, it is a sacrifice I'm making, not being able to establish my own family or have a husband. But I tell myself that I haven't decided against having a family. I've decided for life in a convent. And that precludes the option of having my own family. It's not as if we are forbidden to have any physical contact with other people. I'm someone who really likes to be hugged, especially when I'm feeling low. So it can happen that a sense of longing develops. It is hard sometimes.
Truthful words from a young sister whose daily routine is structured around prayer times. Community prayer begins at 6 each morning and ends in the evening at 9:15. Each day the sisters also attend Mass. Here in her convent in the Ruhr Valley, Sister Regina lives together with 12 other sisters. The eldest is 86. When she takes her final vows, Regina Grefrath will commit her life to the congregation.
We promise to live in poverty, chastity, and obedience. Those are the 3 vows that characterize the consecrated life. In addition, as Augustinian sisters, we have a commitment to educate the young, because that was what the founders of our congregation intended. My own vocation is to teach, to pass on knowledge to children, and to try to give an authentic witness in faith. I can combine these 2 aspects very effectively here in the convent.
The sisters run the school next door. Essen's Catholic High School has an excellent reputation. For the past 2 years, Sister Regina has been teaching Spanish and religion here. But she's known the school much longer. She was a pupil here herself. That's when she first thought about the possibility of joining the Augustinians.
The sisters started offering Ora et Labora weeks for students in senior high school. They gave us an opportunity to look behind the scenes, to learn about how the sisters live, how they organize their community life, how they pray together, what the convent looks like. We didn't know any of those things. I took part purely out of curiosity, without thinking I might one day enter the convent myself.
Regina Grefrath finished high school in 2003, but she never lost contact with the sisters.
I studied Spanish and religion at the University of Münster, but I maintained contact with the convent during my vacation. When I was studying for my exams, for instance, or writing papers, I noticed how the structure of convent life did me good. Rising early, because as a student you never get up early, and then going to bed early, which students don't do either. And in between, those comforting breaks for community prayer, which run like a golden thread throughout the day.
Sister Regina is now one of 3 members of the community who teach at the school. Some of her former teachers are still on the staff. Did they ever suspect that Regina would return one day to enter the convent and teach?
Frankly, no. I'd be making it up if I said anything different. Sister Regina was Regina Grefrath, a girl in my religion class. I remember it was a very lively group of excellent students. She participated in the religion class without giving any indication of a particular leaning.
She could be stubborn sometimes. Once she thought things through, she stuck to her opinion.
Erstmal einen schönen guten Morgen zusammen.
Guten Morgen, Schwester Regina.
Danke sehr. Dann würde ich jetzt direkt mal das Wort an die Referentin von heute geben.
Religion for the 15 to 16-year-olds. The young sister is, of course, dressed in her habit. When talking to the pupils, she doesn't pretend her decision to enter the convent was easy.
They're very curious and like to ask me about private issues or how I view certain aspects of the faith. and it's probably good for them to discover that a sister also has her doubts and has difficulty accepting some things. And if she speaks quite openly about them, it's much more genuine for the students than someone who presents herself as a very saintly role model.
For many years, the Catholic high school was exclusively for girls. 2 years ago, it began admitting boys as well. Regina doesn't try to recruit girls for the convent, but inevitably, her very presence compels them to ask, why does a young woman in today's world want to join a religious congregation?
I think it's incredibly interesting that she lives a different life, that she renounces certain things. Maybe she's able to view her life, everything that's going on around her, completely differently.
We talked about it in class, what we think about it. I said that of course it seems incredible somehow, because I can't imagine entering a convent myself or taking vows. But when you think about it, it's really not such an absurd idea.
She's not the only sister I know. I know 2 sisters who don't wear a habit. They don't seem so unworldly. Of course, when I tell other people that I go to a convent school and we're taught by sisters, they say, "What? You're taught by nuns? Aren't they really strict Catholics?"
The discussion in the pews also covers very worldly topics. Today they're talking about family and friendship. Sister Regina explains that for her, the other sisters in the community are like a family.
I enjoy the fact that when, for instance, I come home to the convent after school, I pass through a door, and when I close it behind me, there's peace.
The cloistered area where the sisters live is simple, a stark contrast to the hectic atmosphere in the world outside.
I think there's a basic need in people to always possess more, to always want the latest model. In that respect, life in a convent is the absolute opposite. We have what we need to live, and we don't accumulate things we don't need. That is very liberating. We're freed from the compulsion to own things.
The vow of poverty means renouncing personal possessions. Sister Regina's salary as a teacher belongs not to her, but to the community.
If I need something, it would be paid for out of the community's funds. It doesn't matter how much an individual sister contributes. I don't even know how much money comes from, say, the pensions of various sisters. That's completely irrelevant.
This week, some of the high school students are guests in the convent. They can see at first hand how the sisters live.
If I needed new shoes, for example, I could go to Sister Edith and say, I need new shoes. Then she'd give me money. And when, for instance, we go on vacation, we're given money to spend, and we don't have to account for it afterwards. We can spend it however we like, whether we buy ourselves an ice cream or go to the movies, it's up to us.
Do you have any special desires that you fulfill regularly, or perhaps occasionally?
At the moment, I would say that I'm perfectly content. I can't think of anything I urgently need, or I don't already have, or really want.
Sister Regina has everything she needs for her work in her room. That includes a computer. And she also uses social media.
When we had the convent's open day, I put a few photos on Facebook so that people could see what was happening here. I also post Names Day celebrations and birthdays, as well as sisters taking their vows. Then, people who know us, and even people who don't, post congratulations. It's definitely a good way of communicating.
Even the eldest sisters gathered for the group photo for Facebook.
We explained how it works, and they have a pretty good idea about it now. I tell them what I've posted, and they show a lot of interest, even if they don't completely understand it.
Almost every evening before night prayers, the sisters gather in their recreation room to chat. Regina Grefrath is the first new sister to join the community in a long time. This life in community was one of the reasons she wanted to enter the convent.
Finally, a young voice in the choir. That gives us a real boost. It encourages us to ask ourselves anew, am I living correctly, as a role model for her? Or must I make some changes?
The community spans almost 4 generations.
Sometimes there are conflicts. And there's a chapter in the rule on dealing with conflicts. That means that the people who wrote the rule realized that it's impossible for people to live together without conflicts arising. But we don't quarrel with each other in front of other people. Those involved in the conflict try to find a solution together.
Despite the lack of vocations, there are still some 18,000 sisters in Germany. But only about 70 young women a year who, like Regina Grefrath, want to test convent life as novices.
It's not as if we're completely cut off from the world. We live right in the world, in the middle of a city, and we have contact with people through the school.
A school trip to a climbing park. It's the first time the pupils have seen their teacher without her habit. They're impressed by her performance on the platforms 12 meters above the ground.
And you see her hair and her forehead. It's so unfamiliar. I didn't recognize her at first.
Yes, we thought she was another student. She looked just like us.
And she seems so much younger.
After the excitement of the trip, Regina Grefrath is glad to return to the peace of the convent. She likes to take life at a quieter pace.
At the moment, I'm happy and relaxed about the next few weeks. I have already made the decision to take my final vows. Nothing could change my mind right now. However, I know from experience that there will always be moments when I ask myself if it isn't too much for me, whether I can persevere for an entire lifetime, because you never know what's going to happen.
Sister Regina keeps up with current affairs by reading the newspapers. She's less fond of television because she has a hearing disability. In her personal prayers, she remembers the suffering and problems she's read about. That's part of the Augustinian vocation.
People can also mail us their intentions. Then we include them in our prayers for a month. That way we can pray on behalf of the world. For me personally, prayer is a source of strength. It means that during the fixed times that we pray, I remember God several times a day.
In the immediate preparations for her lifelong commitment, prayer has a special significance for Sister Regina. Just a few weeks before she takes her final vows, she's traveling with her Mother Superior. The senior sister doesn't like this official title. She prefers to be known simply as Sister Beate.
Wird ihr beim See krank?
Nö. Momentan ist da
It's vacation time, and that's good, so I can relax. But it's a very tense time, because I must review my decision and prepare myself by spending lots of time in prayer.
auch darauf vorbereitet.
If I sensed that she wouldn't be happy in the long run, it would be right to advise her to review her life once again, self-critically, to ask herself if she is really suited to this life and is prepared for it. We don't content ourselves with saying, finally, here's a young sister and we want to hold on to her. That wouldn't be fair to the person.
Leider im Holz gekommen.
Naja.
Kann ich alles haben.
Nee. Man muss mit dem zufrieden sein, was man hat.
On her return, Regina Grefrath meets two friends from her university days. All three women have become teachers. In spite of the various directions their lives have taken, they've kept in contact. Her friends have witnessed the process by which the student Regina has become Sister Regina.
Es ist natürlich schon so, dass ich das selber
Of course, from my own perspective as a young woman, I can't understand it completely. We were crossing a street in Munster once, when she had already entered the convent, and I saw the way that people looked at her. I also saw how some people made remarks, which wasn't exactly respectful. And for a moment, I thought, it's a very difficult step that Regina is taking, a very courageous step, which sidesteps society, as most people understand it. But if you know Regina and have been part of this whole process from the beginning until the time when she took this decision, you know that there is no other possible way of life for her.
It was great when people said, I saw this coming, it's right for you. Somehow that was a reassurance. And there were many people who reacted that way. Some of them were friends I never expected to react like that. But there were also those who said, you're giving up your freedom.
Those included Regina's parents. They declined to comment in front of the camera, but they're opposed to their daughter's decision to enter a convent.
It's very hard for them. I'm an only child. That means they won't have any grandchildren. I think my mother also has the problem that she herself attended a convent school before the Second Vatican Council or during the Council, when convent life was a whole lot stricter. There were bars on the windows and in the visitors' room, and the sisters weren't allowed to leave the convent. I think she's still a bit prejudiced by this image. But I think when you ask the sisters in our convent, they've all had similar experiences. I don't think there's a single sister here whose parents immediately said, yes, enter the convent, we support you. All of them probably had problems. But I think that parents have to learn to let go. They want their children to be happy. This is my path in life, and my parents have to come to terms with that eventually.
The great day has arrived. Holy Mass, at which a young woman will take her final vows and consecrate her life. A fairly rare occurrence in modern-day Europe. This act of consecration is not a slavish submission to rules, but an act of self-surrender to God. And Regina Grefrath's parents have come to the church. Perhaps they'll reconcile themselves to their only daughter's decision, now that it's irrevocable.
Nimm den Kranz hin als Zeichen deiner Beharrlichkeit und Treue in der Nachfolge Christi, auf dass er dich einst kröne mit der Krone seiner Herrlichkeit.
When a sister takes her final vows, the service is reminiscent of a wedding, and that's deliberate. Traditionally, she's described as a bride of Christ. And as such, Sister Regina thinks it's quite natural that she should commit herself for life.
When a woman decides to marry, she commits herself until death do us part. Basically, it's the same kind of existential choice.